Let's learn a new category of virtues, the theological virtues. There are three main categories of virtues: the cardinal virtues, or virtues of character, the intellectual virtues, or virtues of thought, and now the theological virtues. I mentioned in a previous series that for any virtue, one way of defining the virtue is to know the act or activity that that virtue empowers. So for any virtue, there's some act or activity. That's a good way of defining any virtue. Also, any virtue is based in a human power. The word power is, a good synonym is capacity. So according to Aristotle and according to Plato and now Aquinas, there are three areas of human power. First, our feelings or emotions. It is our basic power of being sensitive to the world around us, to our own physical body and well-being. Second area of power is our will, also known as the heart. This is the ability to wish and to belong to things outside of ourselves, such as other persons. It's by our will that we belong to other persons, and it is by our will that we motivate ourselves to act. The second power. And then finally, the intellect or mind is that power with which we think and grasp truth. All of the virtues are based in one or more of these powers. So, for example, the cardinal virtues, courage and temperance, are both habits about our feelings. Justice is a good habit of the will. When I have justice, I am ready to wish for the rights of other persons. And we've looked at prudence. Prudence is a good habit of the intellect, the good habit of deliberating well. All of the intellectual virtues, and that'll be our term all semester as opposed to virtues of thought, all of our intellectual virtues are based, of course, in the intellect. And our most important virtue so far has been wisdom. Prudence is also counted as an intellectual virtue. Insight, I've mentioned, is the virtue of experts who judge and evaluate and who do that well. We recently talked about imperfect happiness on earth. It is the observation of St. Thomas Aquinas that there are circumstances on earth that exceed our human powers. Injuries, adversity, war, pandemics. Well, if our life were truly so imperfect, we would presumably live a miserable life. What should we do? According to St. Thomas Aquinas, we are given certain habits, not by our efforts or by training, but as gifts. And these given habits empower us in circumstances of adversity, in circumstances where our ordinary powers are insufficient. So that's our topic now, the theological virtues. And there are two pages in our Folio C introducing the theological virtues, page 8 and page 9. So first, let's learn what an infused habit is. We know that all virtues are habits according to Aquinas, and ordinarily we acquire habits by practice, by effort, by teachers and coaches and parents. They help us to form these good habits. But as we've mentioned, sometimes in life, circumstances exceed our human powers. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, God, in love of us, puts into us habits which empower us under such situations. That's what an infused habit is. Of course, we use the term infusion when we make a tea, like a peppermint tea. You put the peppermint tea into hot water, you're infusing the peppermint into the tea. Well, an infused habit is a habit which is put into us by God's love. According to the disputation on page 8, any kind of virtue can be infused in us. So God could give us courage in order to confront some kind of danger or adversity. There's a special class of virtues which are called the theological virtues, and according to St. Thomas Aquinas, the theological virtues empower our relationships with God. Here are the three famous theological virtues on the board: faith, hope, and charity. There's a nice definitions or discussion of these virtues on page 9 of Folio C. Let's talk about these virtues one by one. Faith is a virtue of the intellect. Faith is a good habit of the intellect to expect that truth comes from God. It is the habit of the intellect to believe that truth comes from God. Ordinarily in human life, we look for truth in other persons. We expect truth from our authority. It is beyond our ordinary powers to expect for truth from the world beyond. Well, if we are given faith, we will have that habit of looking for truth from the world beyond. Hope is an important virtue for the good life. Hope, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, is a virtue of the will. Ordinarily in life, we of course wish for good life. We wish for happiness. Certain times in life we may face oppression or injury, and so it becomes clear that we're not going to be happy in this life. What do we do then? Well, if hope is infused in us, then we await for perfect happiness in the life to come. That's a good definition of hope, is the good habit of expecting and awaiting perfect happiness in the life to come. Finally, charity. We of course know this phrase as a synonym of philanthropy. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, charity is a virtue of the will. It is the good habit of loving God with all my heart. That's a paraphrase from the Christian Bible. In short, you ought to love God with all your heart. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, loving God with all our heart exceeds our ordinary human powers. In order to do this, we require the infusion of this virtue, charity. Having charity in me, I am empowered to love God with all my heart. These virtues are important for many of our authors because it turns out that the good life, one of the issues isn't so much success or what kind of activity we need to do to have a good life. The real issue often is the fact of adversity in life: failures, injury, tragedy, war, pandemic. Given the reality of all those things, what should we do? Well, many of our authors, for example, Dr. Martin Luther King, will emphasize the importance of theological virtues. In short, we can be happy, we can have a good life, even though we are in adversity, even though we're experiencing tragedy. Okay, well, let's now focus on the first of these, faith.